Welcome into TFW Live. It's the best kept secret in fantasy football, where we keep that week one feeling going all year long. I am Big Travie, and I'm joined here by one of my best friends, Austin. Now, normally we'd be joined by my other best friend, Johnny, but he became a dad on Tuesday.
What?
Shout out to our boy, Johnny. He is now a dad. Juniper Joy Hicks was born, a healthy baby girl. So, Johnny, we miss you, and shout out to her, but shout out to Whisper Nation and all of you in the chat. All of you that are
Jade as well. Mama's healthy as well.
Yeah, exactly. And all of you that will be joining us later as well. And we want to shout out the latest members of Whisper Nation really quick who subscribed and follow us on social media. St. Patrick FF, StatWiz, Andrew Griffin, NFL Outdated, Chris Taylor, Neil Anthony, Jacob Wayne, and Kaika Gonzalez. If you love fantasy football, you want to join a community where you know you belong, hit that subscribe button on the YouTube channel. We're trying to get just one more subscriber on this screen. On this stream, just one more. Could be you. Could be you, Dwayne, who is our very special guest, Dwayne McFarland from Pro Football Focus. You can get his work over at pff.com. We've got links in the description. And follow him on Twitter at Dwayne McFarland. Dwayne, how are you doing, man?
Man, I'm good. I'll for sure at least be the one more. Like, let's shoot for two. Like,
there we go.
I'll be the one. I'm committed.
Over,
you know how it's like once somebody says they'll donate, who's going to match? So I'm in, like, who's going to match me?
There we go. We appreciate
who's
it,
match
Dwayne. Who's going to be like Dwayne? Be the best Dwayne you can be and subscribe to the Fantasy Whispers tonight. So, no, we appreciate it all. We're excited to have you on the show, man. I've been consuming a ton of your work. I've been passing along to the guys over here. And I know you've been doing this for a long time, but it's like you've been coming into my radar a lot recently, and I just love what you've got going on over there. So I'm excited to chop it up with you. But I want to let Whisper Nation get to know you a little bit here. So we've got some rapid-fire questions. If you don't mind, we'll run through them. Do you root?
Sounds good.
Okay. Do you root for your NFL team or your fantasy team more?
I'm a huge Dallas Cowboys fan, but let's be honest. If we're down to the end of the season, especially if you're like in a big money league or you're chasing, like a big championship, like, man, it's your fantasy football team. And I love both, but yeah, I can control my fantasy team much more than I can control the Dallas Cowboys.
Yeah. Yeah, Jerry Jones could probably control his fantasy team more than he can control the Cowboys, but
that is his fantasy team.
Yeah, fair enough.
The beauty of being a billionaire.
Yeah. What year did you start playing fantasy football?
Started playing fantasy football in 1999.
Okay.
99.
Favorite fantasy football player of all time?
Oh, LaDainian Tomlinson.
Yeah.
That's a good one. LT. Least favorite?
My least favorite, I've never had this player on my roster, but they cost me $220,000. It was Nick Foles. He overthrew Zach Ertz. I only needed one more reception from Zach Ertz over at the FFPC Football Guys Players Championship in 2018 on a Monday Night Football game against the Raiders, and he missed him on like four different passes. One of them was 5 yards away from Zach Ertz in the flat, and Nick Foles couldn't get it done. So I won $30,000 instead of $250.
Oh my God, $30,000 is amazing, but the difference in that one, holy cow!
So
yeah. That was
sorry we had to.
But that's what we do it for, the sweat, I guess. That's what you say anyway after you lose like that. That's what you tell yourself.
Yeah. What's been your favorite fantasy football team name?
Well, I am a huge fan of the movie Tombstone, so I like to use those a lot. So my favorite is, Say When, probably, where Doc Holliday, is basically daring, Ringo. He's like, say when, like whenever. So that's my favorite, but I use all sorts of different ones from Tombstone. I don't do as clever. Like, I see some really clever ones, like in the lobbies that I play in. I'm not as creative or, I guess, as much of a comedian as some people. I've seen some really good ones over the years, but I just kind of stick with some of the things that I know.
Something that kind of gets you in the zone, right? That's what you're trying to feel. You're like, hey, I want to be.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to be
your groove,
badass,
man.
Yeah, exactly.
Shout out Arizona.
Yeah.
Tombstone from Arizona. There we go.
What is a sound or noise you love?
Man, there's two favorites, but number one is like just being by the beach, hearing the beach coming in, just that relaxing feel, especially if you got, like a beer going, just chilling, hanging out with the family. We're doing a vacation here in a couple weeks, so we'll be getting to do that. But my other favorite is just like if you wake up in the morning, like kind of right as the sun's coming up, you go out. We kind of live out in the country, so like just nature, man, just the simplicity of, all this stuff going on, that's just taking care of itself. Like, and we're worried about all these trivial things, and important things in our lives. But, we can get worked up about really trivial kind of things. Even this game like that we all love to play. And I'm sure you guys, I get serious about it. You probably get serious about it. But at the end of the day, it just kind of always like resets me, balances me, gets me ready for the day, and just make sure that, I'm just keeping everything in perspective, really, is what I'm trying to do.
I love that answer. The sound of nature is the sound of process happening. It's just, wow, serene. I love that.
Love it. Favorite swear word?
It's probably the F-bomb. I don't know why. It shouldn't be.
That's 3 for 3.
It's undefeated. Every guest is.
It really is.
Yeah, I mean, it sticks. It's a good one. What are the most leagues you've played in at one time?
I've played in upwards of 60 managed leagues before, that was real fun. Waiver wires are pretty tough. I try to keep it to 2 to 3 dynasty leagues now. And I get invited to more, and I feel bad because I've been saying no lately, just because I'm like, man, I got to get this thing down to where like I can just truly enjoy it, because I'll usually play 12 to 18 like mid to high stakes teams and redraft. I like having 2 or 3 dynasty, and I like leaving some room to still be able to pay attention to DFS. If I get too much past that, like if I get past that mix, it's too much. I'm fine throwing best ball on, because you can draft them and you're done. Like that's the beauty of best ball. It's like once the draft's over, you don't have to worry about it. You can just check in on them, and the rest is history.
Love it. Well, we've talked about your most painful moment in fantasy football. What's your favorite moment?
My most exciting moment in fantasy football. So before that FFPC loss, I got to go to Vegas for the FFOC. So it's now defunct, but it was called the Fantasy Football Open Championship back in the day. And it was really cool. So the top 12 players, it's kind of like best ball is today. You had a 12-week season, week 13, 14, and 15, or week 13 and 14 were the cut downs. And then week 15, the final 15 players got to go to Vegas. And so me and my buddy Daniel, we had bought a bunch. He buys a lot of teams with me every year. We split a lot of them. And so we got to go out to Vegas. We got to meet Jerry Rice. And dude, he was so cool. We got to hang out with him. So my favorite moment that came from fantasy football is I was out in Vegas. I got a buddy back here in Dallas that's super, super serious about playing flag football. And like his team's really good, 4-on-4 flag football. And so I was telling Jerry Rice this story, and I was like, hey man, I'm going to call him. Will you prank call him? And Jerry Rice agreed to do this. So we call my buddy up, and I tell him, I'm like, hey man, I'm sitting here in Vegas. I know y'all's team is full, but I got this guy. He says he can play. He's being really cool with me. I didn't just want to completely be like, no, I'm not going to call my buddy and see if you can join the team. I said, so I'll let you talk to him. Like, you don't feel like you have to do anything, but just be cool to him, and Jerry Rice is sitting there listening to this whole thing. So I just hand him my phone. He starts talking to him, and he's just carrying my buddy on for like 5 minutes. And he gets later in the conversation, like it's like my buddy's like taking him through credentials, like of what he's done in his career. He's doing it so cool. And Jerry Rice is kind of keeping him on the hook. And then he's like, but I don't know, man. Lee's like, sometimes I get flashbacks, and he puts it on speaker, and I can hear my buddy like, flashbacks from what? And he's like, on us in the league, just getting rocked by all those linebackers and this and that. And he's just going on. And then I hear my buddy, he's like, who am I talking to? And Jerry Rice also, I guess F word is his favorite. And can we swear on the show? Can I get your answer?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so he goes, Lee, this is Jerry motherfucking Rice. So that was a pretty cool fantasy football story.
Yes.
What? That is amazing. I just love the part when your buddy's like hustling him for his resume. Like, well, why do you think he'd be good for the flag football team?
What's your 40 time? And Rice could totally be like, well, it was a 4.6, but it never mattered.
Yeah, exactly.
I played at a small school. I was overlooked, but I did a couple of things, and I'm pretty proud of.
With my dad.
Yeah.
Masonry. Yeah. He was so cool about it though, and just so humble, down to earth. Like he interacted with everybody, but it was really cool. We got to spend a lot of time just hanging out with him. And he didn't treat it like he was there just because he was being paid. Like he really did hang out with everybody. So I thought that was pretty cool of him to do.
Go on and off the field.
Yeah, it's cool, the humility, and then to go Jerry motherfucking Rice is that's the icing on the cake.
Still got the swag though when you need it.
Yeah, exactly. Favorite game day beverage, Dwayne?
Man, I'm simple with that stuff. I usually just go with a brew. So I mean, I'll switch it around. Like right now, it's like summertime into the early part of the season. I'll do like Dos Equis, Modelo, little salt and lime. Then as I start to get more into the fall, I'll usually switch over to something easy like Miller Lite, something really boring that nobody wants to hear about.
So boneless or bone in for your wings?
Bone in.
Yeah.
Bone in guy. Yeah.
And then kickoff, it's 2 minutes away. You're still deciding your flex. Are you going to go with your gut or your weekly rankings? You're going to look at the spreadsheets.
I'm going with the spreadsheets, man. I'm going with the ranking. I put too much damn work in it, to eliminate my gut ruining stuff.
Love it. So we try to end this section. Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to give a shout out here to Z, who said he'd been following you since he was below 5,000 followers. Dwayne, utilization charts changed the game.
Cool.
So got a fan.
What's up?
I know Z works over at awesome. Football Guys too, so he's definitely grinding himself. We love Z. So we try to end this with like a tailored question for our guest. I've been noticing that Ian calls you Dwayne the Rock McFarland in every intro for the PFF podcast. So it got me thinking of an interesting keep trade cut scenario here, Dwayne. I'll pitch it to Austin first and then let you come in after. Chris Rock, The Rock, and Kid Rock. We got to keep trade cut.
I'm keeping Chris Rock, trading The Rock for the value, and I'm cutting Kid Rock.
Oh man, I was this exact same, and for the same reasons. Like The Rock, man, like the value you're gonna get, and I don't know how I got The Rock, just other than his Dwayne Johnson.
Just Dwayne,
like,
it's like
I mean, you guys can see like my traps are really huge.
Exactly, because you just look just like him.
Exactly.
Well, we appreciate it, Dwayne. And before we get into the show, we want to take a quick break and let people know about something coming up in July.
Mock Draft Marathon. What is this? It's consecutive mock drafts for a total of 24 hours. Requires hours and even years of preparation.
Which is a little bit controversial, but...
Are you shitting me, Johnny?
I didn't plan that, I swear.
I can pretty much say 100%.
Something that you really love to do.
Let the games begin.
Somebody came in and stole Johnny and they're hijacking his draft.
Oh, he's going to blame it on his 78-year-old neighbor.
Damn it, you guys snuck in a super flex. I knew it.
Ball is going to taste different than this meatball.
That's not that bad from a flex.
Outliers decide fantasy champions.
Stand out above the crowd. About the same set of 200 players, and it never gets old.
That's right, July 23rd and 24th. Make sure you're subscribed to the Fantasy Whispers. We're going to be getting the best in the industry again for the 4th annual Mock Draft Marathon. We're pumped for that one. All right, we'll get into some of the news and notes, guys. And the first one on the list here is Michael Thomas speaking at OTA. Saints coach Dennis Allen said that wide receiver Michael Thomas is doubtful to participate in next week's minicamp. So I'll kick it to you here, Dwayne. I wanted to ask because it's now been like conflicting reports back and forth. We thought he was coming back. He should be back by now. Where are you at, like panic meter wise, on Michael Thomas this year?
I'll really be panicked if he's not back, for training camp. I'm not really worried about, OTAs, mini camp. I mean, obviously we would like him to be back here, but I think the value is softening enough on Michael Thomas with ADP falling into the 7th round over at FFPC, events right now, like around a 6 or a 7 over on Underdog. So I'm still fine, taking Michael Thomas in that range just because we know he's a 30%, 28-30% target share guy. He's done that historically. Not very many players can do that. Right. So given that, I'm willing to still give him a little bit of a pass. But if we get to training camp, still lingering on, we're into, mid-August. At that point, I'll probably just stop drafting him. But my concern is if I don't draft him now and he does start practicing, as soon as he does, his ADP is going to shoot up 2 rounds just because of the name value alone. So I'd rather go ahead and draft him now because once that happens, I'm probably not going to be as in.
That makes sense. Try and get your value now while you can. Moving on, we'll talk Jameson Williams of the Detroit Lions. His head coach, Dan Campbell, told reporters he doesn't see Jameson Williams being ready for training camp as he rehabs that ACL. Austin, kind of a similar question. Obviously not as much panic. Well, this is not something we expected him to be ready for anyways. How are you feeling about in redraft for Jameson this year?
Redraft wise, I'm happy to pick him up if the value is right, as is the case with any fantasy football player. I did want to just take a point, though, to point out on Dan Campbell's lines, coach speak, right? You just showed the preview for the mock draft marathon. Hugh Jackson, I thought, gave a great breakdown on coach speak when we had him on in last year's marathon. And what he said was coach speak always has an ulterior motive. It doesn't mean you're hearing the truth or a lie. It just means they don't care about telling the truth or a lie. There is another reason why the head coach or the person at the microphone is going to be speaking what they're speaking. Maybe it's to motivate a player on their team. Maybe it's to throw off the defense. Maybe it's just to set the tone in their own locker room. There's a lot of different reasons why they might be doing it. When I see Dan Campbell say that he doesn't see wide receiver Jameson Williams being ready, I see him not putting undue pressure on the player and the offense. It's like, why would you need to get anybody else excited? This was a bottom level team last year that we're all expecting to come on up, but why set those expectations higher? Under promise, over deliver.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to look at Jameson too. We move on here to the Los Angeles Rams talking Matthew Stafford. Sarah Barship of ESPN said that Matthew Stafford will definitely be ready to throw during training camp. Dwayne, Matt Waldman actually was the only analyst I've heard this offseason to kind of bring some concern to the procedure that has happened to Matt Stafford. Are you concerned? Like, do you see this as something, because he's obviously played through a ton of injuries in his career? Does this kind of downgrade any weapons and Matt Stafford himself for you?
It's not for me yet. And I mean, obviously I respect, what Waldman has to say. But I'm not at the point where it's bothering me. Again, kind of like what I said with Michael Thomas, I'm still more in a wait and see kind of mode right now. And that's typically my answer on a lot of the players, for OTAs and minicamp,
Right.
Unless, to your point, like it's something we really just weren't expecting. Like Michael Thomas, we weren't for sure. Jameson Williams, we didn't expect him to be doing this. Matthew Stafford is just really coming more to light because a lot of people just didn't pay attention, to what was going on with him. So I guess we could call that, out as being a little bit different, but it was something that, I had kind of already been monitoring. I think some people are kind of, worried about it because they hadn't even thought about the fact that Stafford had shoulder surgery. So, I feel fine.
All right, moving on to another quarterback here with maybe some concern clouding him a little bit. Ravens head coach John Harbaugh said he expects Lamar Jackson to report to mandatory minicamp next week. So the Lamar Jackson saga continues with his contract. Is there any concern, or you think we'll be good here, Austin, rolling into the season for Lamar? He probably gets that long-term deal.
This makes me think, if we're not overreacting in the offseason, are we even reacting? It's fine. I'm with Dwayne on this one. I'm not concerned about these OTAs. Lamar Jackson's not a rookie at this point anymore. He is that dude, if you're asking me, and I think he's going to be fine. I have no concern at this point.
So the next bit of news is on Saquon Barkley. He says his body feels good. He's trusting his knee heading into 2022. He's feeling a lot better. This feels like a familiar song and dance we've gone through. But Dwayne, this is the cheapest we've ever gotten Saquon. If we talk about test cases for like ADP rising through the summer, I feel like he's going to be a guy, as people start to see him more and more, that he'll get further up. I wanted to know your exposure rate on Saquon and kind of what you're feeling about where he's being drafted.
I'm getting it as high as I possibly can right now.
Yeah.
I have no concerns. I don't worry too much about exposures until later, unless I'm playing in certain tournaments where you're going to be capped in a certain window. So maybe you think about it if you're in the puppy, but even then, you're going to draft enough puppy 2 or puppy 3 teams on underdog that you won't get Saquon later. So I'm taking as much Saquon as I can get. I mean, we're getting a 25-year-old running back that's a former elite, player. Can he get all of his spring back? We don't know yet, but he's an every down back. So, and the big thing is PPR half point. We know he can be an absolute stud in that format, catching the balls out of the backfield. So I think Barkley, to your point, by the time we get to August, will be, possibly as high as a early second round pick. My guess is he'll settle in somewhere around the middle of the second, because we'll have just enough people that are like, I'm not doing that again. I'm not doing that again. So you'll have some crowd that'll just avoid him, but I think it'll be a kind of a wide range. In some drafts, you might see him go as early as the late first. Like, where in another one, he may slide to the second half of the second round still. But right now, you can still get him in the early third over on Underdog. You're already starting to see a lot of redrafts sharpen up, though. Like over at FFPC, I was in a draft last week where I want to say he went at 2-4. So, I mean, you're already seeing some of the sharper drafters jump on. And I meant elbow earlier on Stafford, not shoulder. I don't know why I said shoulder, but elbow injection. Sorry.
All good. Z pointing out Singletary was third in route runs under Dabo last year. Barkley with a 22% target rate last year in routes run, saying it's a good marriage, Dabo and our guy Saquon. Moving on to Sammy Watkins, who's starting a new marriage with the Green Bay Packers. Head coach Matt LaFleur told reporters that Sammy Watkins is going to be a big part of our offense. In quotes, Austin, We know we loved the draft pick as Packers fans of Christian Watson. We hope that can flourish. I guess we want to know if we're getting hyped on Sammy Watkins outside of just week 1. Can he make it?
Oh, yeah, baby. We go to week 2. Yes, we're going to go half a month. Yes, we are, Big Travie. Double that.
Yeah.
Double that week 1. Take it into week 2.
I hope
Take it into the middle of September.
We threw
That's
him
about as far as
into
I'm
a
going to go.
deal. Yeah, we threw him in a deal in Dynasty, so I'll take it.
Yeah, we took him. I've been a Sammy Watkins fan longer than most have, and I have started him week 1 with his Kansas City Chief days, and I have dominated that week. I think he needs a lot of things to happen for him, but I think a lot of those things are available in Green Bay. I don't have enough of the psychological profile of Sammy Watkins to really weigh in on if I think he's going to be able to eat meat in this offense, but we know the draft capital. We know he doesn't have that much tread on the tires. We've seen him hit that ceiling inconsistently, but he still has touched it, even somewhat recently. It's a nice flyer for me. It's something I'll get excited about, but I'm not going to bank on at all.
Yeah, Dwayne, I wondered if you wanted to add anything to the Sammy Watkins thing, because I was thinking about it the other day, and it's like if everybody's healthy the full season, and everything's perfect, maybe Christian Watkins has the most Christian Watson has the most upside. But does Sammy Watkins maybe potential swing for the fences league winner style?
Yeah, so a lot of times what'll happen whenever we have someone like Devonte Adams leave an offense, we all, because it's what we love to do, we want to immediately rush in and figure out, okay, who's going to come in and all of a sudden have a 25, 26, 27% target share. But really the most likely answer is we're going to have a bunch of guys be between 16 and 19, and that's where I see Watkins. But I do think especially in best ball, he could come through for you in certain weeks. To your point, he is an elite athlete. He's got elite draft capital for a reason. And I thought, your way, of breaking it down, from Austin, from the psychological profile, you're right. That's the missing ingredient. I think that we all don't understand with Sammy Watkins, but we know we've seen him be elite for stretches. So I have no doubt, right, that we'll see a few good games from Sammy Watkins, and hopefully he can stay healthy, and we see that throughout the year. But I think for where you get him for free at the end of a draft, I know the easy thing to say is he could easily lead the Packers. That may mean a 19% target share. So I just wanted to kind of qualify. And that's really what Sammy Watkins has been for his career. He's never really been a 25% kind of guy. His targets per route run are always somewhere between 17, 19%. He's had a 20%er. So he probably is what he is at this point. But getting targets from Aaron Rodgers, there is a different quality of target that you're getting versus what Sammy has typically seen, in the past. Now, I did get that short stint with Patrick Mahomes, but you also had Travis Kelce and you had not Juju Smith-Schuster, and Tyreek Hill. We'll talk about Juju later, but Tyreek Hill soaking up a lot of it. Yeah, big time.
Just to add a little bit into that point there, we know how heavily targeted Devonte Adams was with Aaron Rodgers last year, but that wasn't totally typical of Aaron Rodgers. Traditionally, he has distributed the ball. I remember notably, I don't even know how many years ago it was, he broke a record for having 10 completions to 10 different wide receivers in the same game. And I remember fading on Randall Cobb, even when he was primed out, just because I'm he's going to distribute the ball a lot. And I think we'll see some more of that Rodgers coming back in.
It's when you guys mentioned the psychological profile, who better to take on a psychologically weak wide receiver than Aaron Rodgers? Yeah, I'm sure that'll go over well. I'm not saying he's psychologically weak.
We're on Mindhunter or something right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Bring back season 3, by the way. Of that.
Yes, I would be all in on that.
We're going totally off the rails, but I love it. Naji Harris is the last bit of news here. We'll talk about the Steelers and Naji Harris are discussing reducing his role on certain downs. So I'll kind of open it up to you here, Dwayne, because I think the question for me is, without a declining Ben Roethlisberger, will the Steelers get to the volume they got with Naji as a pass catcher? Obviously, maybe a rookie would help that, or Mitch Trubisky. He's mobile. I don't know if he'd throw to the running back. My question is, because there are some people that wonder if Naji Harris was really all that good based on advanced metrics last year. And I want to know if we think there's going to be enough volume this year to kind of justify his ADP.
Yeah, and I think some of the concerns with his advanced metrics are fine. They weren't terrible. The biggest thing he was lacking was really the explosive rush rate. So those are carries of 10 plus yards. He was only at 9%. The league average is 10.5%. But we have other guys that are in that range, right? Like Leonard Fournette, James Conner. I mean, he profiles more as a projected volume guy, right? Not necessarily like this elite talent that can't be replaced, in his offense because he's making everything happen on his own. All of that said, like, you could take away, 15, 20% of his snaps and it might help him. Like, he had multiple games where he was in the 90%. He had 2 games where he was at 100% of the snaps. So I think it's still fine. Like, to be a good, running back one, typically we want you on the field 65 to 70%, of the snaps. That's really good. Like, there's guys that do it on less than that. So, I mean, yeah, we would love to see the 80 to 90%, but I think there's a chance that keeps him fresher. I expect them to go under center a lot more. The pace will probably slow a little bit. They're going to run less plays. They're going to pass the ball less if they can, as long as the defense holds up. Game scripts can often just smack you in the face, though, and make you forget all you want to do as a coach. So with Harris, I'm still fine. I think I don't take him as he has a wide range on him. Like, I saw him go number 1 overall the other day, which was kind of insane. That's not normal,
Yeah.
But I mean, he'll creep into the top 3 sometimes, and then I'll see him fall to the early part of the second in some drafts. But typically he'll be somewhere like between pick 5 and pick 10. And I think, as you start to get to the bottom of that range, it's fine. I'm not going to worry too much about it because I think he's a young player. Overall, the volume should still be there. And who else are they really going to give all this work to? Like Benny Snell, Anthony McFarland, my long lost cousin of somehow. Like, I don't know where I don't know where these touches are really going to go.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, that wraps up the news. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Help us out. Get one more subscriber on top of Dwayne, who's the one for today. You can join him as well. All right. Speaking of Dwayne, you've got this great article out over on pff.com. So, guys, that link is in the description. Make sure you check it out. We're identifying breakout wide receivers, and this is a how-to article to do so. And so, without giving the whole article away, that's not going to be the point here. We want you all to read it. But, Dwayne, I wanted to say, first of all, how do we define a breakout wide receiver, and kind of what was, why? Why do you use that to define them?
Well, I mean, I did a couple of things. Just going back and kind of researching the data and looking at, the cut marks that we had kind of traditionally used and toyed around with some different things. But ultimately what I settled on is since like 2011, I just basically plotted out wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, 3, 4, 5, literally the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, right? And once I got to wide receiver 12, I made that the cut mark. So 263 points, is the cut mark for the wide receiver 12 since 2011. But what I think that's, important because like sometimes we just refer, has the player had a wide receiver 1 season? Well, sometimes, how it goes, you have a season where a bunch of guys get hurt or for whatever reason, some weird things play out. And what would normally be a wide receiver 2 actually finishes as a wide receiver 1 for the season. So I wanted like these steady benchmarks based over the last 10 years or so where we could say, did they get above it or did they not? Let's not call him a wide receiver 1 because it was a weak season, right? For the bottom half of wide receiver, ones that year. And then the same thing, if you have a really strong year where a guy would be a wide receiver 2, but typically over the last 10 years, he really would have been a wide receiver 1. Let's just call it that. And then the second part of it really was just looking at, I wanted to look at breakouts as being your first time to either be a wide receiver 2 or your first time to be a wide receiver 1. So if you were a wide receiver 2 and then you became a wide receiver 1, you could have 2 breakouts. And the reason I wanted to still call that a breakout is just because of the large disparity between what the top end of the wide receiver 1 range can look like versus the bottom end of a wide receiver 2 range. So for example, if you look at the top 6 receivers, they've averaged 330 points. Since 2011. If you look at the bottom 6 receivers in the wide receiver 2 range, right? So you're looking at, wide receivers 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. That actually comes out to 223. So there's a 100-point difference between the two. So if you take a leap like that, that's still another breakout. So, I mean, it's not perfect, but I really wanted to have, more standardized benchmarks versus just saying, well, it was this season or that season. And then I really wanted to give receivers a chance to take more than one big step, in their career, because we love wide receiver 2 finishes. They're great. But really what we're looking at, we're wanting that really high-end wide receiver season, right? And a lot of receivers only get one of those in their career. So that's the reason that I kind of set it up this way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, totally. We want the big, the big guys, the big.
I just want to say I love this so much, like on a personal way I play fantasy, because I've gone down bad directions in years past where I have in more novice days of my fantasy football playing I would look at wide receivers in similar ways that I would look at running backs, and I would overvalue opportunity. And I would say, oh, this guy's in a great opportunity to get a lot of work. And it just doesn't work out that way. And getting a wide, like, yeah, you have so many wide receivers. You can find a flex option. You can find someone in a good setup, but to consistently get yourself a good wide receiver, like, that's a lot more than just opportunity and matchup. Like, they have to really be good. And I see you shedding some great evidence and data points on showing where you can find that 100-point difference between a wide receiver 2 and a wide receiver 1. So I just want to thank you for this work and excited to jump more into it. Personally helps me out.
Appreciate it, man. I'm the same way. I just learn from my mistakes, and honestly, like, we live in such an awesome community where we've got Twitter and people are doing, I've got TikTok. I'm not doing it yet. I'll get there. I guess I'm a boomer, but like, there's so many ways for us to share information, like us doing these pods.
Yeah.
And so, like, you just constantly, it's like iron sharpens iron. You hear other people talking about something, and you may not even take their exact take, but you're like, that's interesting. I want to go look at that. I want to go research that. And what I love about our community is people are constantly taking something that someone else did, and then they're building off of it, right? And then giving credit, and everybody's sharing. So it's fun to be a part of that. That's one of my favorite things about, like, our industry. As weird as our industry can be sometimes, and negative and cynical as some people can be, overall, like, it really, at the end of the day, I think it's a good community to be a part of. And I love the fact how everybody comes together to make one another better.
No doubt.
I love that you said that there. Me and Austin have been talking offline about how, fantasy football fosters curiosity. It kind of forces us to go through these thought experiments. And I just think that it's so great to be able to have that. And then, as you said, get smarter. Iron sharpens iron here. One of the quotes from the article here is that 85% of wide receiver 1 performances over the last 11 seasons came from 2nd to 8th year wide receivers. And a similar distribution plays out for the wide receiver 2 finishes, 83% of those. On the other hand, a wide receiver 3 finish is more plausible in year 1, and it appears more receivers can attain that level in years 9 and 10. So I guess my question was, does this give you more confidence to potentially eliminate rookie wide receivers or 9th or 10th year wide receivers when you're drafting for your wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 slots on your roster, or even if, like, in those late rounds, if you're swinging for upside?
Yeah, so I think it depends on the rookie. There are exceptions. So, like, I did some work last year for PFF in the preseason, just looking at, wide receivers taken in the top 10. And they can buck these trends a lot of times. We saw Jamar Chase do it last year. We saw Jalen Waddle do it to a lesser extent. And so some of it depends on that, right? But at the same time, most of the time now it is getting more aggressive, especially, like, depending on the format you're playing. If you guys know how it is over an underdog, like, the whole receiver queue will be empty by, like, round 5 because, like, everybody's going, like, 0 RB. But typically our rookie wide receivers, even though they are getting more expensive, they're actually getting priced right now in ADP. Typically, though, we still can get them as a wide receiver 3. There are years where last year you had to draft Jamar Chase as a wide receiver 2, but he was worth it. Jalen Waddle, though, you were getting Jalen Waddle at a wide receiver 4 price. CeeDee Lamb is rookie year. You were getting at a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 price. AJ Brown, Justin Jefferson, you were getting for nothing, a wide receiver nothing price their rookie year. So there's still plenty of value to soak up with the rookies. But I do think, to your point, one thing it has really pointed out to me, and we kind of know this, like, the career arcs kind of start to show up in the charts, that if people want to go look at it, the older players we definitely know that we do start to see a drop off. So I start to bake that into my projections really around, like, season 8. There's also a combination of, like, how old are they? But for example, like, we've got a lot of guys this year going into years 7, 8, and 9. We already talked about Michael Thomas going into year 7. Not the worst case, because he's already been there. He's already been a wide receiver 1. We're not looking for him to break out. But then, we've got Mike Evans going on into the later part of his career. You got Keenan Allen going into the later part of his career. So those guys, I'm shaving a little bit off because we know that the cliff could be coming. I know we're not talking about them today, but their underlying data points that I talk about for breakouts later are also on the decline. Yards per route run have been down 2 seasons in a row for both of those players. Targets per route run have also been down 2 years in a row for both those players. Now it's hard to fade them because they play in freaking awesome offenses and they have good quarterbacks, right? But I don't want to be overexposed. If I'm going to draft 10 teams and somehow I land in a draft position where it would make sense at ADP that I could have those players every time, I wouldn't do it, right? I would make sure that I'm diversifying off some. And I basically like to grab players like that past ADP. That kind of becomes my rule that, okay, great, I'm going to draft enough that whenever I do draft those two players, it's going to be at value. And that's the way, like, Evans is really getting steamed at this point. Like, he's wide receiver 8 off the board, and I love him, but there are some underlying data points that scream problems. And people, and I think what's steaming him, great, he plays for a pass happy offense. That's really good. Plays with Tom Brady. That's really good. But I think everybody's overestimating, like, Chris Godwin, yes, could be slow to start the season. He could even miss 6 games and be on the pup. But by the time you're in your money league, in your money weeks of your league, like, they're probably going to be playing with a full deck, right? So where is Mike Evans going to be in your most important weeks of your league? Last year, he was winning leagues because Godwin was out. When Antonio Brown was out, his targets didn't even go up at all. They stayed the same. But when Godwin left the lineup, he really spiked, and he had some huge games because Mike Evans is still a good player, but there are just some concerns, with him that make me not want to be overweight.
So my question here comes from you have a lot of added nuance and some underlying data points that I know that you consider. And so this factors some of those in with my question. Based on your top level data approach, wide receiver 1 and 2s traditionally are coming from our wide receiver, their second and third years that are coming in, but they're still available in years 4, 5, and 6. Dwayne, for you personally, when you're drafting, are you looking for more of those high upside, maybe high excitement, year 2, year 3 wide receivers, or do you generally fade that hype and look more for those 4th year, 5th year possible breakouts where you can likely get them at a cheaper price, but you're still expecting their production to be just as high as some of those more hyped guys? Where do you find yourself drafting?
I'm trying to roster as many of them as I can. Right. I want to increase my odds of, if I draft 6 of these players, 3 of them have their wide receiver 1 breakout. Like, if that happens, mission accomplished, so ADP. And the other thing I have up over at PFF, people can go check out. And I've really tried, this is my first full year with PFF. It's my first full year in the industry. So I've really had more time to detail stuff out around my process and just refine it, make it better. And plus the data that we have at PFF, like, I didn't even know what I didn't have yet because I hadn't had access to all the data. And so now I've had much more time to research it. And I've still only, like, it's tip of the iceberg kind of stuff. Like, there's still more. See, my dogs agree that, like, tip of the iceberg with this. But and looking at it, what was I saying? My dog's, like, just totally threw me. Like, my dog was talking to me, but no,
all the data points that PFF has.
Yeah. So all the data points are awesome. But what I've done in the tier article where I was going with it is I've set things up for you where you can basically see, here are the underlying things that really point to a player's talent. Here are the underlying things and so for receiver, first thing you want to know, can they generate targets? That's the number one thing you need to know. It's the most important thing you need to know. Then the number 2 thing, can they generate targets like all over the field or just underneath? Because not all targets are equal, right? And you guys know this, air yards, Josh Hermsmeyer, that's where that all comes in. The deeper target is down the field, the more likely it is to have value. So if you can attack deep and underneath and intermediate, okay, great. Like, you're checking all those boxes. The next thing is still talent. What can I do with the ball once I get it in my hands? Am I good after the catch, right? Can I do what Jamar Chase did against the Kansas City Chiefs? Catch, like an 8-yard pass for a first down, make the first guy miss, and then accelerate and take away every angle on the field and be gone. That, like, is like that's like big game breaking talent, right? And it shows up in the data typically. But the other part of the equation comes back to around, the opportunity and the quality of the opportunity. So what does my target competition look like? That's really, my, part of the equation. But then the other part is, am I on a good team with a good quarterback? Right. So if I get to play with Joe Burrow and, I'm expected to win 10 games, like, that's a lot better than playing on a team that I may think is going to be pass heavy, but is only projected to win 5 games because Sam Darnold's the quarterback. So I lay all of that out for you. And, like, so target competition is based on the number of teammates going in the top 36 receivers at ADP or top 12 tight ends. Like, so it's not just me saying it. Like, there's some data I throw in there, but it's like, what does the market say? The market's telling us. The market's usually pretty efficient. Like, ADP is a lot more efficient than what a lot of people give it credit for. So if people want to see that, I wasn't trying to get this on off on a tangent, but I lay it all out. And so if you happen to be someone that's just like, wow, I see DJ Moore super talented, but I don't care because Sam Darnold sucks. That's all there for you to see. And if you want to skip him in that tier, you can. So it's all
this breakdown is so good. And when you talked about arriving at Pro Football Focus and them having all this data, the data you didn't even know you didn't know, It made me just think of the Matrix. Like you get there, you sit down, they plug you in, and it's just like
Exactly.
all
That's
there.
what
And
it's like.
I'm jealous. I'm gonna be checking out that article for sure, and we're gonna be clipping this breakdown that you just had out, no doubt too. That was super helpful.
Absolutely. If we dive a little bit more into when the wide receiver ones break out, Dwayne, you said, as we'd expect, a huge portion of year 2 finishes were breakout performances across the board, with year 3 following closely behind. But interestingly, the percentage of players reaching wide receiver 1 status for the first time doesn't fall off as quickly as we might anticipate. So basically, we see you point out that wide receiver finishes happen most in the second and third year. It doesn't stop there, though. We can see it in 4, 5, and 6. And given those breakout wide receiver ones with decent hit rates, why do you think that is that we're still getting them later on? And I think, is it because of player trades that we've seen more frequently, or pass friendlier league, or something else?
And so here we're specifically talking about getting that true wide receiver 1 finish, right? So getting past that, that threshold that we talked about earlier of 263 points. And what happens is you will actually have quite a few players, like DJ Moore is a great example right now. Like, he's been really close to being a wide receiver 1. Like, he's had these wide receiver 2 finishes. He's just missed. So he's never technically been a wide receiver 1, but on efficiency alone, right, he could have an anomaly kind of season, up or down. One that could make him a wide receiver 3, one that could make him a wide receiver 1. We've in fact seen this, like Amari Cooper, is a really great example. In his breakout year, where he finally did get to wide receiver 1 status, he had a career high in ADOT. It went back down the next year. It was just a fluky thing. So his yards per target were at a career high, but his targets per route run, all those things didn't change. Yards per route run was just a little bit better, but a lot of it was just because, for that whatever reason, that year he got more air yards. You'll see other guys do it based on their yards after the catch, right? They'll have just a phenomenal yards after the catch season. It's enough to make them a wide receiver 1 breakout for that season. So, and we see this with quarterbacks too, right? Where all of a sudden, they're pretty good, but they'll have we saw with Matt Ryan, decent quarterback back in the day, low end QB1. Kyle Shanahan comes in, all of a sudden he's a QB3. Why? Not because he threw the ball more. It's because efficiency went insane. Like, now he did have Julio Jones. They had, Tevin Coleman that year that they were using. So, I mean, they had a lot of different weapons, that they were spreading the ball around to. But I think John Brown might have even been, I can't remember who else was there that year. But anyway, it's just a situation where efficiency, a guy's already been a wide receiver 2 on efficiency alone. Like, he's going to eventually have a wide receiver 1 season. And that's really a lot of what happens, because what I will say, so what you're speaking to, I think you guys tell me if I'm wrong. So wide receiver 1, the, percentage of guys that are first time being in a wide receiver 1 for year 2 is 78%. Year 3 is 82%. Year 4, 66%, year 5 in the league, 40%, year 6, 60%. So the problem is, though, the raw numbers are going down that whole time. So, like, if you look at it, in year, 2 and year 3, we have a lot, the pool is much bigger. The pool shrinks the further you get away from year 3. So even though it's 60%, it's like we have a smaller pool and we have a smaller denominator. So there's not as many raw like players. Now, some of it takes care of itself, because as these players get, age, if they don't really play well, I mean, they're out of the league or they lose a job anyway. So that's also part of it. Injury plays a role. But there are some other things, like sometimes players can change. Year 6, sometimes it can be a team change, right? That can, getting that new environment, can give somebody a second chance, reinvigorate them. If we want to go back to the Sammy Watkins example, maybe it's a psychological profile thing, right? They come over and click with the right quarterback, right coach. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different factors to go into it. But where the pool is the biggest is still in those early seasons.
Yeah. Great numbers here connected to year in the NFL. Have you drawn any connection to their actual age related to their breakouts, or are you specifically just looking at experience in the NFL?
For this study, I looked at the experience, but I mean, age can matter as well. Like, I've looked at it both ways. I chose to do experience because as much as we love, like when we're looking at rookies coming in, we want them to be younger. Those things are all still true and they're still good. But at the end of the day, really what I wanted to tease out is, like, once a player has had a chance to get to the league and learn, right? Because until then, it doesn't really matter to me what age. Once they're here and we've graded them as a rookie, and that grade's on the books already. Right. Like, we've already graded them. We think what they're going to be, but now they're playing in the NFL. And so from there, really what I just wanted to tease out is, like, what does experience do for a player or what does it not do for a player? I thought that was, and maybe I'm wrong, I took the approach of that way, but there are some really good studies out there that are similar, kind of like this, that look at it from the same way as age. And maybe next preseason I'll do one on age too, like just to match it up with this one and see, like, do we really get anything different? I don't think we're going to see much difference, right? I mean,
I'd be interested to see.
Most of these guys are pretty close to the same age.
Yeah. I'd be interested to see maybe like I agree wholeheartedly with your talking of they're in the NFL. These are their grades. This is where they're at. Possibly then with maybe the decline statistics related to age, like experience in the NFL compared to ages when the decline starts kicking in. I could see some really strong data points come into light in that.
No, I think that's a good point too. Yeah. And we've seen that with running backs. You know, you can look at both things. You can look at age, but also we know that the touches, like, so once a running back is at 1,500 carries, like it really, like we start to see a decline in their rushing yards over expected. Like, and it's pretty, we see it pretty broadly. And if folks haven't seen that, you can get that for free over at PFF. It was an article that one of our interns, and he's brilliant, Tej Seth, Tejseth. He's not with us anymore. He moved on to bigger and better things. He'll probably be like running an NFL team one day, like while we're still talking about, you guys may not be, but I'll be talking about fantasy. He'll be running a team. But he did an article just looking at that and like did a great job of breaking down like what workloads mean for running backs. And it's not behind the paywall either. That one's free.
Nice.
I love all the juicy stats we're getting into. I hope Whisper Nation's enjoying it as well, because this is just like really important stuff as we get into, trying to figure out how these players are going to score us points in fantasy. So talking about some of those indicators, Dwayne, you state that the top indicators for predicting a breakout are previous fantasy football finishes, PFF receiving grade, and targets per route run. I think you also throw yards per route run in there. Can you talk about what yards per route run and targets per route run actually show us about a receiver?
Yeah. So why I love all of those things is really because it's kind of, it normalizes everything, right? We're looking for the quality of what's going on. Volume, we know, is a huge factor in fantasy football. No one's ever going to debate that, and we can easily tease out volume. But what I really wanted to be able to look at is, okay, what does the quality of play look like? And so for PFF, for those of you that don't know how a PFF receiving grade works, we'll just talk about receivers here. If a receiver goes out and just basically does their job, catches a 5-yard pass, doesn't do anything to make somebody miss a tackle or anything extra, they get graded as a 0. Every play is graded on a scale of -2 to +2. And then all of those get put together to ultimately, and they get normalized to give you a PFF receiving grade where you'll see a player is 87.5. Right? It's all based on everything's getting scaled. And so Jamar Chase, I'll give you an example. That play we just talked about against the Chiefs. So he catches a pass for a first down. If you get a first down, you're at a +0.5 now on the PFF grading scale. Had that been a 7-yard reception on 3rd and 15, whenever the defense is playing soft coverage, you don't get a +0.5. That's why I love it. All of that context comes into play. Like, they actually want to stop you from getting a first down, and now you still got a first down. The defense didn't just give it to you by playing top coverage or something like that. So the first part is the 0.5 comes from getting the first down. Then he makes the first player miss. I think it was the safety. That's +0.5. He did something extra on his own. Then he created an angle, used acceleration, and outran everyone else on the football field. That's another +0.5. So that's a +1.5 play. And look, like over 90% of plays end up as a 0, right? For all the positions, right? It's right around that number. And so it's really around the most, you get more +0.5 plays than 1s and 1.5s and 2s. 2s are really rare. You just don't see that many. So what I love about that is it's all about like the player having to, and it's about them doing their job. It's independent of what, other people on the field are doing. Is the receiver doing their job? Is
independent of the system
doing their job?
Yeah.
So that's why I like that. And then targets per route run and yards per route run are very similar, but they're just easier for people to understand because like they can quickly understand the math and the calculus of it versus with PFF and the way grades work. Sometimes people, it's tough to like explain all I just gave you. I tried to make it simple by giving an example. I think when you do that, it's pretty easy. Sometimes people get kind of twisted with PFF grades. And here's the other thing, like you can't just go correlate PFF grades to fantasy points. And that drives people crazy. Well, why? You could have a really high PFF receiving grade, but if you only played like 30% of your team snaps, of course you didn't score fantasy points, right? So it's more about, does that correlate to fantasy points per snap? Like, so if you got a high PFF receiving grade and you've got a high PFF points per snap, or these other metrics that I'm talking about, I love them because they equalize the playing field. So for example, a great example is Kadarius Toney. Like, without targets per route run and yards per route run, we might not really know how good Kadarius Toney is. A lot of different factors kept him off the field, some of them injuries. But the beauty of these stats is they equalize that for everyone. We're only counting it for the time you're on the field. I do use minimum thresholds. You have to at least run 200 routes to be included in the data set. That's where it starts to stabilize. And so with Toney last year, like, he blew it away in targets per route run and yards per route run. And because of that data, we can look at that and say, okay, great. And his PFF receiving grade was also really good as a rookie, meaning if he can expand his role, this is a player, like, if he can be on the field, I would expect him to be able to demand targets, right? In the Giants offense. So that's the beauty of these kind of stats. And that's what differentiates them from just target share, right? A target share is great. And a target share is if you add routes run plus targets per route run, it gives you target share. Those are the two pieces. Are you on the field? Are you good enough? That's going to drive your target share. So it all still comes back to target share, but it's just an easier way to quickly normalize without having to go back and take games out, take certain things out. It's just basically saying, when you were on the field, what were you able to do?
These are such rich stats, and I am so grateful that Pro Football Focus exists because of the meat it's able to provide, and it hasn't really been a tool available to us, I think, as long as we all expect. We see PFF stats up on NFL games, when it's Monday Night Football being brought up, and I also remember when Andy Isabella came out of college, and it was like, this is the highest drafted, or this is the highest graded wide receiver coming in at this position in PFF's history, and it was like a 5-year history. So I'm just like so excited about what you guys are bringing, and listening to you break down some of these deeper analytical tools makes me want to just have a whole hour with you to break down even more. Like, I'm seriously nerding out. Like I'm about to pop right here. But moving on, I wanted to know if there were some stats you see the fantasy football community bringing into the conversation often that are really more of a distraction than they are helpful. What's a stat you see people bringing up that doesn't really add a ton of value to your analysis, but it still is brought up time and time again?
Yeah, I mean, like, so for running backs, a lot of people know yards per carry, but we've already been through that. I think the biggest one is honestly something you already hit on earlier. And it was really just saying that, look, opportunity is just part of this. And so what I'll say is quality of opportunity matters. You want a good quarterback, you want to be on a good team. But I think the thing that often gets the most overrated, and not that it doesn't matter at all, but I think and I've done it in the past, we put too much value on it, is target competition. Like, so I'd rather have, a player that doesn't have all the target competition playing with a great quarterback and an offense that passes the ball. There's just not many of those. Yeah. But at the end of the day, like, I care less. So Devonte Adams is a really good example. Do I think Devonte Adams is going to be a 28 to 30% target share player now with Derek Carr? Probably not. But do I think he's going to drop to 22%? No, I don't. Does that mean that Hunter Renfrow and Darren Waller can also probably get 20%, 22% of the targets? No, they all could, because you know why? They're all really good. There's not that many offenses that have those three really good players. And I know what a lot of people want to point to. Well, we've only seen this many years whenever we've seen, an offense have this many players. Well, if you go back and look at those offenses, it's typically because those are the ones that actually had three really good players.
Right.
And so, does it cap them in some way, shape, or form? Like, you hear this all the time with T. Higgins. People, Jamar Chase is on the team, can't draft T. Higgins. Why? Like, this is an offense that, like, yeah, we need them to throw the ball more, but they have the young quarterback. We saw him do it at the end of last season. I care more about that. Are they just willing to throw the ball enough? I'm less worried about, Jamar Chase boosting to a 28% target share, and that meaning that T. Higgins can't get to 20. That's just not the truth. Like, T. Higgins can still be, he could still take a step forward and be a 24, 25% target share guy, and Tyler Boyd could be an 18%er. Like, I mean, that's all stuff that can still happen. It all really comes down to the talent on the team. Does it matter? Yeah, a little bit, because it can cap you. It can cap a player, right? Where you can't get that 32% target share season if you've got three really good guys like that. But I'm just not a believer in, I'm just going to fade Hunter Renfrow now because, Devonte Adams is there, or, I won't touch Devonte Adams now because, he's playing with Darren Waller. I just don't buy that.
All right. I love that we've broken down kind of the numbers behind it, but I think Whisper Nation is like, hey, tell me about some players here. I want to, I want to be lazy and not read the article. Yeah. Let me put this to work here. But please read the article. The link is in the description as well. Dwayne, when we looked at the second year guys, just who pops out as your favorite second-year fantasy football target for Breakout this year?
Yeah, so for me, and this one's kind of fun because it's just such a lightning rod like in the community. But for me, it's Amon-Ra St. Brown. I love Elijah Moore as well. I like Rashad Bateman, but Amon-Ra St. Brown, like really just when you look at what he did, in his rookie season, and here again, this comes back to, so what's the argument like on Amon-Ra St. Brown? It's that, well, man, he didn't have all those 30% target share games until, TJ Hawkinson went down, right? And DeAndre Swift was out of the lineup. But at the end of the day, you know how good you have to be to demand 30% target shares repeatedly over and over and over? You have to be a really good, football player, like at the end of the day. And so that's what I'm buying into with a guy like Amon-Ra St. Brown. And people forget, like he was only 21.9 coming out as a rookie. Jamar Chase was 21.6 years old in year one. This was not an old player. He did slip to the fourth round, and these things happen sometimes, but he posted a PFF receiving grade that was worthy. He had a wide receiver 2 season with 223 points, but he also backed it up with a wide receiver 2 worthy PFF receiving grade of an 80. And so, I mean, those are things that I look for. And so with me, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and a lot of it does come back to ADP as well. And now let's just bake in the couple of extra things. Like we still have questions with Zach Wilson, right? Zach Wilson, can he boost Elijah Moore, right, to be at the same level? Because I like Elijah Moore as well. He had a 73.8 wide receiver grade as a rookie, which was wide receiver 3 threshold. He had a 24% targets per route run, which is wide receiver 2 worthy. He also had a wide receiver 3 yards per route run of 1.75. So Elijah Moore checks a lot of similar boxes, not quite as good as Amon-Ra St. Brown, because the easiest way to find future fantasy producers is they've actually already produced in fantasy, right? Then you look at these advanced stats to help back it up. So with St. Brown, like it's just a player that I know. Jared Goff, do we love Jared Goff? No, but we've seen him support multiple fantasy weapons before. We haven't seen that, from Zach Wilson. So I do start to pull the other pieces in, but they're more tiebreakers. But the profiles of Amon-Ra St. Brown looks good. Devonta Smith checks all the boxes we want. Elijah Moore, from again, just as far as checking their talent, like they've already shown they can demand targets. They've shown in data points that are individual away from just the volume that these guys are worthy of more. Now, will they get it or not? Like some of the other factors will play, but they're all eligible. So Amon-Ra is my favorite, and I like the ADP on him as well, because now Bateman's ADP has just kind of gone, like it's like it's going through the roof. Like and Bateman honestly graded out the lowest of all these guys. Like his PFF receiver grade, he got like just above the threshold I want for a rookie, but ultimately it was a wide receiver 6 PFF receiver grade. His targets per route run, wide receiver 6. Yards per route run, wide receiver 6. He didn't touch any of the other thresholds, but he is a former first rounder. We've seen guys that at least get to that 65 grade, be a former first rounder, and if they get to that 65 grade, we've seen 9 out of 10 former first rounders eventually post a top 24 finish. So I still feel good about Bateman, but wow, like him leapfrogging all these other guys in ADP just because Marquise Brown is gone, like means I'll get exposure to him. I just probably won't be able to get as much.
That was a perfect setup, Dwayne. You say, target competition actually doesn't matter as much as we think it does. Let me bring up some guys that are studs with some target competition that are scaring people off this year. I think that's really important to dissect right there. Let's jump into the third-year guys. There seems to be like this big 3 for the third-year guys getting steamed up right now. CeeDee Lamb, T. Higgins, Michael Pittman seem to be that kind of big 3 to me, at least. I wonder if you'd rank them for us, maybe speak to who has the biggest ceiling of those 3.
Yeah, it's Lamb. Higgins is right behind him, and then it's Pittman. But I love all 3. So over in my ranks on PFF right now, I've got CeeDee Lamb ranked as my wide receiver 6. I've got T. Higgins as my wide receiver 9. I've got Lamb as my wide receiver 4. I've got T. Higgins as my wide receiver 9. So this is for 2021, not just Dynasty. And then I've got Michael Pittman as my wide receiver 11. So I think that alone like shows how much I love them. If you go check out my tiers, you'll see why. Like everything about their talent profile, especially CeeDee Lamb. I tweeted about it the other day. I just said, look, CeeDee Lamb living in a sea of blue. I color code everything like blue and red. And so like everything is blue across the board. Basically, like he's right there behind Jamar Chase with everything that he's doing. He just hasn't quite hit it yet. And here's the thing with Lamb. Like he's really been around a 75% routes per drop back kind of player because the Cowboys have had so many guys they could rotate. If Lamb doesn't take a step forward in his targets per route run, which he's already at a 22%, even if he just sees 85 to 95% of the routes for the Cowboys, which I would argue it's going to probably be impossible for him to not see 90 to 95%, on that alone, like he's already going to be a higher end wide receiver. He's already been a wide receiver 2. So now he's going to be on the field more. So even if he doesn't take a step forward, that's what I love about Lamb. Like his floor is probably a low end wide receiver 1. And most people don't realize that. They're saying, well, I got to see it from Lamb first. I don't think most people are accounting for a floor of a low end wide receiver 1, but his ceiling is wide receiver 1 overall, because he's checking every single box that we want to see across talent, opportunity, quarterback, all of it grades out great for CeeDee Lamb.
Love this one. Moving over here into year 4, Dwayne, in the article, you say that only 2 wide receivers since 2011 have broke out in year 4 as a wide receiver 1, while never finishing as a wide receiver 1 in a prior season. Looking at this year's slate of 4th-year wide receivers, I see 2 really interesting names I'd love your take on. Those are Scary Terry McLaurin and A.J. Brown, both dealing with some impactful new variables. Carson Wentz, quarterbacking for McLaurin. A.J. Brown now in the Philadelphia uniform. What are you looking at with those 2 wide receivers?
Yeah, man. A.J. Brown, he's a beast. Like, I mean, he pops in ways like in this stuff that it's pretty rare. Like it's rare how well he does. So looking at A.J. Brown, just looking at his career so far, obviously he was already a wide receiver 2 as a rookie. He scored 217 fantasy points. And if you look at him, though, his PFF receiving grade that season was an 83, which is really good. That was wide receiver 2 worthy. But his yards per route run was already a 2.67, which was a wide receiver 1. Now, Hayden Winks has done some really good work at looking at whenever you play more out of heavy sets, because there's less receivers in the route. So if you've got a fullback, they don't catch many passes. If your tight end's not good, they don't catch many passes. So yards per route run can get a little inflated by playing in a type of offense like the Titans, but it's still such high-end numbers from Brown. Like, it's absurd. And it's not just that. In year 2, he had a 90.1 PFF receiving grade as a wide receiver 2 and a wide receiver 1 yards per route run. And then in year 3, even though he was a wide receiver 3, because he was only out there for 58% of the passing plays, and this is why I love these data points, because they don't lead you astray, 86.8 receiver grade for PFF. That's a wide receiver 1. Targets per route run, 29%. That's a wide receiver 1. And his yards per route run, 2.49. That is also a wide receiver 1. So basically everything about A.J. Brown screams, I am an elite, badass wide receiver 1. It just hasn't happened yet. Do we wish? God, I would give anything for A.J. Brown to have landed with the Chiefs, or one of these other teams. He didn't. So a lot of the same challenges that he had with Tennessee are obviously going to still be in his way. It's a team that could try to remain run heavy. I will say, Philly is not as grounded in being a run-heavy team as what Mike Vrabel, right, is with Tennessee. I think there's still a chance we see, the Eagles warm up, throw the ball a little more. I think they're going to still use the run because it helps set, Hurts up. But, man, like, you just can't count A.J. Brown out. Like, eventually, like, these numbers are so good. Like, every receiver that's had these kind of data points eventually had a monster blow-up wide receiver 1 season.
Yeah, I just you've talked recently on a couple pods, Dwayne, about like just defaulting to talent, and I think AJ Brown is like the pure test case for that, like defaulting to talent, because you can see it, like he passes the eye test, he is the dude. And Ron in the chat here, a big Eagles fan, is saying, hey, preach, he loves it as well. Dwayne, I know that we kept you a little bit longer than we wanted. Austin just had a couple grab bag philosophy questions, and then we'll get you on the road here.
Yeah, a few more players if you guys want. Like we're good. I can go a few more minutes. It's up to you.
Well, I did want to actually really quickly then, if we're going to ask a couple more players, 6th-year wide receivers jump into the end of the list here. Kenny Golladay was a name that popped out. He's obviously gets talked about for a lot of different reasons. Last year versus what he was able to do in Detroit, the injury, a lot of different things circulating. But he's a 6th-year wide receiver. What do you say about Kenny G?
Yeah, I mean, looking at Golladay, like he hasn't done like some of the elite things that I just talked about with Brown, but here's what I like about Golladay. I mean, the big discount is really just coming because he got hurt, right? In year 4, he got hurt. He was hardly ever able to play last year. And so in year 4, he's only out there 21% of the routes for his team with the Lions. Then last year he gets traded to the Giants, misses preseason time because of an injury, then gets injured, just never was able to stay healthy, only out there 63% of the routes. But whenever you look at Golladay in that year before with the Lions, even though it was a smaller sample, 2.47 yards per route run, that's a wide receiver 1. Targets per route run, 23%, that's a wide receiver 2. 79.8 PFF receiving grade. That is also a wide receiver too. So I still feel at this point like his ADP is just like he's free. You can get him in like round 12 or 13, of drafts, even in drafts where receivers go really fast. So that's the beauty of Galladay. Like, his stylistically, the way he plays, sometimes those guys can take a little bit more of a beating. But with Galladay, I think the ADP still adds up. And, I like Kadarius Toney, but there's tons of questions around him, right? We just, Toney just can't seem to stay out of his own way at times. And so there's a lot of targets just basically up in the air with the Giants, and Galladay has shown in the past that he can demand the targets.
So here is my grab bag question. I was listening to your podcast with Ian Hartitz. It was a 3-person best ball draft, you, Ian Hartitz, and one other gentleman there, and it was really insightful. You mentioned liking drafting in the middle. You felt that it gives you the most value that can slip your way. I've felt this way similarly, but oftentimes we don't get to draft in the middle. Sometimes we got to draft at the ends. For me personally, if I'm drafting at the ends, one of the little philosophies I've coined is I like to grab the guy who fell the farthest, who has the most value, and then I end up reaching to take the guy that I really like that I know is not going to be there in 23 picks. Always trying to get it better, though. What are your philosophies for drafting at one of the ends, either the start or the backside of a draft?
Yeah, so I think for those first 2 picks, it's pretty much, what you just said, or just taking, the value that has fallen, or like, so for every year's a little different. So, and it depends on the format you're playing in. So you really want to look at, ADP, and you want to kind of map out multiple steps ahead. If I go wide receiver, and I feel I need a back, is there going to be one that I really like at round 3 or 4? Like it's kind of like a process. Like, you've got your flow going, and the answer to that is yes or no. Right. And if the answer is, there's somebody you're still fine having as your RB1, if you think you need an RB1, see, some people want to pass again, but even then, like, you would still you're going through the process. And what you need to look at is, are there a pool of players that are typically there? You can't make it where it's like, well, every 10th draft, like whoever, Breece Hall makes it, So you need to know that, look, 80% of the time, either Breece Hall, Travis Etienne, or whatever, name 2 other players that you really like are available, at those picks. And if you're comfortable with them, fine, go wide receiver. Otherwise, I'm taking a running back with one of those 2 picks, because the biggest thing being on the turn, you guys know how it goes. The position runs happen right in front of you almost always. You never get to be a part of them. You are the dude left out, or the gal left out, like not getting to, you're just like, feel like you're stuck at the kids' table at like Thanksgiving. You can't go sit with all the adults. They're getting to have all the fun. They're having the drinks, and you're set over there with like your cousin Lenny or whatever, and it's just terror. So
Lenny.
I map out. Yeah. I map out those kind of things, and I look for where those buckets are. And again, it is different whether you're underdog, half point PPR, and the way they draft there versus FFPC versus your home league. They're all a little bit different. So I always like to think multiple steps ahead, and that's how I map out. Am I willing to go receiver here? Am I willing to go maybe receiver? Even to that extent. But like this year, early on, it was fine. You could go receiver, and you could still come back. Like early on, you could still get like Saquon would sometime even slide down there. Like a month ago, Aaron Jones was sliding down there. Now you can for sure get Breece Hall. You can sure get, Travis Etienne, but it's a matter of how do you feel about those players? And then that helps answer the question. And I'm doing that basically all through the draft, because once you get like 4 or 5 rounds, you can get a feel for how it's going, and you're trying to think multiple steps ahead. That's where tiers are really handy. I start counting like, okay, this is what ADP says. I think there's still going to be a chance that one of these 5 guys is going to be there. And the bigger the chance is that I can get something else back that I want, the more likely I am to like really, roll the dice on something. I do like from the turns pressing the issue and trying to start runs, that way, if you can get everybody else on a run, and by the time it comes back to you and then there's a new run starting, maybe you still get to participate right before that one's over. So I think there is some strategy involved. I don't know that it works that good on underdog, because it's 30 seconds, and people, they're fine. They'll just take ADP. They'll just take the top of the queue. Yeah. Whereas if you're in a minute and a half or a 2-minute pick, I see people much more likely to overthink it themselves and make a bad pick than just let the queue pick the top player.
Man, I could talk for 2 hours about like your draft strategy here. That was, I mean, you put a lot of meat on everything here, but I was actually thinking earlier today at the day job, I was like, man, if you could have all the multiple scenarios out in your head, how much of a better drafter you'd be. It reminds me of those old school like mystery books. If this happened, like if you want this to happen, turn to this page, like that's
exactly
how you were,
it. Yes.
Yeah, you
Choose your own adventure.
Yeah, exactly. You were like describing the different scenarios, all the butterfly effects that could happen from that. And I think that's brilliantly laid out. And then starting the runs was another one that you just said that really is, I'm going to be just making a book of all the different possible scenarios.
They feel so good when you start a run too. It's
it is so satisfying.
It's probably it's the antithesis of that other feeling you talked about, being at the kids table with cousin Lenny. It's definitely,
and it also tells you when to reach.
Yeah.
Sometimes you need to reach. Sometimes you have to throw ADP out the window. So I was in a draft 2 weeks ago, and it was FFPC. So it was 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, 1 tight end, 2 flex, tight end premium. So you can flex tight end. Tight ends go fast over here, right? Not best ball. This is redraft. And we got to round 8, and I was looking at my team, and man, I needed a tight end. I didn't have a tight end yet. And usually I will have one in that format by then because it's 1.5 points per reception, and you can really get left out quick. But I looked at the board. I'm lower on Dawson Knox than consensus. I looked every other owner in the draft except for one had a tight end already, and one guy already had 2 tight ends. And so I was like, all right. And I looked at my queue, and I was like, Dawson Knox is still there, and I don't want him. One of these guys is going to take Dawson Knox, or one of these players is going to take Dawson Knox, and I'm going to have my choice of Irv Smith or Albert Okwuegbunam when it comes back. 2 players that I really love. And that's exactly the way it ended up playing out. It's not always perfect. Somebody could have sniped me and taken their second tight end because you could flex it there. But just looking at their rosters, I was like, man, it was in a spot in the draft. Like that was in the eighth round coming back this way. And so I actually skipped it again in the 9th and let it go as well. And coming back in the 10th and the 11th, I got Okwuegbunam and Irv Smith. But it was just by looking at everybody else's rosters, looking at my tiers, taking that brief second to just kind of plot it all out real quick, like in your head. And that's why I like 90-second clocks instead of 30 seconds. Like it just gives you enough little bit of, like sometimes on Underdog, like it's just trying to keep up, and I love Underdog. It's awesome. And I'll draft it from it's the only league I'll draft from my phone laying in bed, right? And I've gotten to where I can do it okay. But I like having that little bit of extra time because I can really look at the board, look at what other people have, and then I can let that play out. So what that allowed me to do was I reached on Chase Claypool by 2 rounds because I felt the receivers and running backs were all about to go. And once it started, I felt everyone would do it. And so it was kind of thinking multiple steps. If I take the receiver now, maybe I help start the run. And I also can avoid being complete left out because I needed a wide receiver 5 at the time. And then the double whammy would be like, okay, knowing Knox is there, if that's the only tight end to go, I could still potentially get both of mine because I was drafting in the 2 hole and the guy behind me already had 2. So I knew he wasn't probably going to take one. If I could get down to me and get Irv Smith and let Alberto go by, he probably wasn't going to take him either. And so I would be able to get both.
Draft Day Diaries from Dwayne McFarland. We love it, man. We love all the knowledge you've given us here. Tell the people where they can get some more of that awesome work you've been putting out, man.
Yeah, so you guys can find me over at PFF. I just released my top 150 this week. I've got all the tier articles up. I'll be updating those over the next week or 2. Most of them have been updated in the last couple of weeks, but just based on some of the more recent news, just really thinking through them, I'll be tweaking those. But they've got all the data that we've talked about for the running backs, receivers, tight ends. It's got the talent, the ability, what they can do after they get the ball, their team situation, all that stuff is all laid out. So like if you don't necessarily like my tiers, I break each tier down into like 3 or 4 more tiers, mini tiers. And then that way you're kind of like, well, it's in Dwayne's tier 2, but I don't want anything to do with, this tier of like the big one this year is DJ Moore, Deontay Johnson, and DK Metcalf. Because of all of them, like they're on teams that aren't expected to win like, 6 or 7 games. They have bad quarterbacks. We know the talent's great, but you may just think, you know what, I'm out. So fine. Like you can reach down to the next tier right behind them. I've got Cortland Sutton that's sitting there, right? A little bit later breakout candidate, but has the quarterback. And Russ Wilson also has a later ADP than those guys. So I bake ADP into the model as well. So you can find all of that over at PFF. You can also check me out at Dwayne McFarland. It's DWAIN McFarland on Twitter. And then I also am with Ian pretty much every day of the week over on the PFF podcast. I have one more. I also have a podcast that I do with my buddy Brian Drake that we started like 5 years ago. Like 2 people listened to us in a basement somewhere. It was probably us. We were probably in basements listening to ourselves. But it's called the Fantasy Football Hustle. And so I do 1 or 2 of those a week. And we've been doing a lot of drafts lately. So that whole FFPC draft I talked about, that high stakes draft, we broadcasted that whole thing. You guys can go check it out over there. And then we've done some underdog recently too.
Check it out, Whisper Nation.
Do it. We love it. Thanks so much, Dwayne. So for Dwayne, for Austin, I'm Big Travie. We're the Fantasy Whisperers, and we are out of here. Peace.
Right here.
Hey, you like mock drafting? So do we. Check out one of our previous mocks in the videos here and like and subscribe to catch next week's mock draft coming your way.